Live from the SABC's Auckland Park headquarters, welcome to this Tuesday edition of the Watchdog. My name is Vuyo Mvoko.
The slimes dam belong to the mine, not the department.
The situation in Jagersfontein remains precarious, but for its part, the government is washing its hands of the mine disaster. We also look at the country's tuberculosis time bomb. According to the World Health Organization, we are among the worst affected countries that account for 86% of the world's infections, deaths, and suffering. And TB is now the second leading infectious killer disease after COVID-19. Those two topics are focus on tonight's episode of The Watchdog, which starts now. As the residents of Jagersfontein continue to count the cost of Sunday's dam wall bust, questions continue to be asked about who should take what responsibility for the disaster. The death toll remains unconfirmed. Roads have been cut off while power and water supplies have been disrupted. Scores of people have had their homes, personal belongings, as well even animals washed away. This afternoon, Minerals and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe and his team descended on the mine town for a fact-finding mission. Who should take responsibility was one of the first questions the minister was confronted with.
I want to refer you to that judgment because it's easy to find it and to read it. It says in 2007, the slimes dam belonged to the mine, not the department. And therefore, at the time it said, DPS is the owner. So whoever owns it now is a legal successor to DPS. Therefore, they will take responsibility. In anywhere, wherever there is a disaster in a mine take responsibility of that disaster. If you want to trace the history of disasters, look at the Kindos disaster, look at the Valrips disaster, look at the Sendelina disaster, look at the Klobani disaster. All those disasters were handled by the respective mines. That's what happens in a disaster. But the state comes in and lends its hand to help find a solution to the problem. We don't wash our hands and say, it is not our responsibility. We're here, we'll work with the company, we must find a solution to this disaster. It's quite a big disaster.
So, what's going to happen now? Well, according to the Minerals Minister, this is what is expected to happen next.
When there's a disaster in any mine, there's something that is called inquiry, where that investigation is done in details, people make submissions, people raise questions, and the outcome of that inquiry determines the outcome. Anything that try to say somebody was negligent and all that now would be putting the cart before the horse. And it's quite dangerous in a situation of a disaster. We are visiting a disaster site, okay? You don't go to a disaster site and negotiate agreements. That's not what you do. When you go and visit a disaster site, one of the things is try to understand the cause of the disaster. How did it happen? Were there any precautions? How regular was the dam inspected? And all those issues. And ultimately conclude that, listen, we're not going to interrogate you in details because there's going to be an inquiry. We don't want anybody to compromise evidence that may be helpful to that inquiry. And that is the essence of visiting a disaster site.
Marius de Villiers is the company's legal compliance executive. He was supposed to join us this evening here on the show, but he has since sent us this statement saying he won't be commenting further, let alone appear on the show as the company had agreed to do earlier in the day.
Jagersfontein Developments is devastated by the breach at its Slimes Dam yesterday and impacts to the local community. We have made 20 million rand available immediately for affected people on the ground and the restoration of the town. We extend our deepest condolences to the family of the single fatality and the speedy recovery of those injured in the disaster. The treatment facility has stabilized activity at the dam. It is cooperating with local authorities and will offer every assistance to the community while undertaking a full investigation. We have confirmation that the wastewater is not hazardous. Jagersfontein Developments remains committed to the well-being of the community and will lead the cleanup operations. Unlike
Jagersfontein Developments, whose spokesperson you heard from there, and the Minerals Department, the chairperson of the National Assembly's Portfolio Committee on Minerals and Energy, Mr. Sahlulele Luzipo, has been kind enough to agree to come on the show. Thank you, sir, and welcome.
Good evening to you and the listeners at home.
Thank you so much. We are also joined by Dr. Salima Valiani, who is the editor of the publication, The Future of Mining in South Africa. Good evening to you too, Doc.
Good evening to you and to the listeners and to the representative of the department.
Thank you very much for your time. Well, he is from Parliament and not the department, Doc. Of course, I mean, this is, I don't remember something like this happening in my lifetime. Of course, I mean, there is this pending inquiry, Mr. Luzipo, as the minister was pointing out, and that's where people will be able to ask questions and, of course, I mean, hear submissions of from everyone involved. In his words, he doesn't want to put the cart before the horse. But your thoughts from the time you heard about this disaster?
Look, good evening to you, Vio. Good evening to the viewers. Look, I think the first thing we must say, and maybe you corrected, you know, I'm always very careful that there is this misinterpretation that Parliament is equivalent to the executive. We don't represent the department. We respect the views of the minister, but we're entitled to our views as public representatives. The first thing, like yourself, I'm sure that was the first reaction you had. I just assumed that because there's mining activity, then it automatically means that the issue will relate to the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. I was quite shocked that when we inquired with the department, the response I received was that this mine did not necessarily fall under the authority of the department, based on the fact that there was a court order that when the department wanted to issue a mining right, both the seller and the buyer went to court and challenged the authority of the department over the mining right, and therefore the court ruled in their favor that the department had no authority over the mine dams, and on the basis of that they could exchange the mining right, the mining activities in that instance. And therefore, it meant then that the mining rights now will be determined through the health and safety activities, which then falls under the Department of Employment and Labour. And that's where some of us believe that there was more of a judicial overreach, as we all know that the Department of Labour will not be capacitated enough to understand the complex nature that you will find when it comes to mining activities. So that is one issue that is a problem. But I think also we must extend our condolences and sympathies to the families that have lost their loved one, and wish a speedy recovery to those that were injured in the process of this exercise, and say that we hope that the law will make it an example that our people's lives should not be treated as if they matter less at the expense of profit making.
Can I take you up on that, though, because can we really call it overreach? Because let's just say the courts, looked at the law and then said, this is what the law says, and then they ruled accordingly. Was it not the responsibility of the government then to say, but clearly there's something very wrong here. This is not what the law was actually meant to do, and then challenge that. And then if the problem was with the law, and then you as legislators would then have had the responsibility to correct the wrongs that may be apparent in the law.
Look, sorry if I happen to cut off. I may not have had the complete statement that you have made, but I think the point is that why then didn't you react on the matter? You will recall that we will not understand. We are not part of the operational activities of the department, which is the issue we're inquiring to the department, that if there was such an incident, why then, and we hope they will be able to provide an answer, why they didn't appeal. In fact, what we have said is that even if the time has lapsed, you can do what we call, it's a condonation application. A condonation application will be determined on the merits of the case, not on the basis of the lateness of the case. And we hope the department, based now on this incident, it will have a strong case to apply for condonation for a reversal of this decision. Well, also, and I'm saying this from a point of view of what generally is the view, not a position of the committee. That's the disadvantage of a parliamentary committee, because you can't have your position when you lead a committee. But we hope the department now will find a way to see whether that can happen. We'll continue to engage with them. But you will recall also that there is a court ruling that said it supports when the then Chamber of Mines challenged the authority of the department to be the sole, to take sole responsibility to issue mining rights. The court ruled in that instance that the department or the state is a custodian of the mineral wealth beneath the soil on behalf of the people, and therefore it has got a right, therefore, to issue mining rights. And we think if you've got such a ruling, it is in contradiction with the current court order that was issued in this instance. And on those grounds, we're of the view that all measures possible must be made that through the processes of the current legislation, which is the MPRDA, the Minerals and Petroleum Resource Development Act, they have to come into effect and ensure that there's full compliance.
And that's exactly, that was a point really of my question, because if there's a lacuna or there's something wrong with the law as the custodian of the country's mineral rights, I mean, they had a responsibility to actually then move on to then, look at the next steps and how to correct whatever may be appears to be wrong with this. But Dr. Valiani, I mean, are you surprised at all by what we are hearing? Of course, I mean, a lot of what we've spoken about so far is in the realm of speculation, and whether it's a department washing its hands off, or the company saying, oh, we think everything is fine, but we'll try and, or as far as we can, to actually sort out what needs to be sorted out, but not really taking responsibility in the manner that you would expect someone in their situation or position to do.
Thank you, Vuyo. This disaster is not a surprise to me. We have mines all over the country that are leaking acid into bodies of water, that are degrading the soil, creating losses in biodiversity, and generally destroying landscapes. We have also more than 6,000 disused mines in the country. So this particular mine has clearly stopped operating on a large scale. It's operating at a minimal scale, and the company which recently bought the mine, as well as all of the liability related to it, is the biggest manufacturer of diamonds in the world. That manufacturing is happening right here in Johannesburg. So clearly money is being made. Nothing is being done by corporations or by the state to maintain mines, maintain dumps, and clean up all of the disused mines. We are going to have many more disasters like this, in addition to all the human losses already seen in South Africa and frankly elsewhere in the world.
But how do, I mean, from what you know and what you've studied, how do other jurisdictions who have done or are doing better than us manage this kind of situation? Because it's so different from, you know, what happened in Rustenburg, where there were those rapes and no one wanted to take responsibility for what they left behind, which then, you know, created this conducive environment to crime, the breaking of the law, and a whole host of things.
Excellent question. Here's one model that I know is, it has been put into a legal framework in Canada, which is where I'm originally from. The starting point is prevention. So before a mine is approved, the calculation is done as to what the ultimate damage of the mine will be, what the potential dangers are. And a company is then required to make a deposit into a trust or whatever means financially to cover that in advance of even digging the mine. This is a way to begin with prevention. What we're doing now here in South Africa, we're waiting for the disasters to happen. We are waiting for inquiries. We are waiting for court cases and ultimately court battles. Through that, both the state and companies blame each other and ultimately do nothing.
Mr. Lucipo, I mean, am I being unfair or wrong in dragging, you know, Krugersdorp, you know, where, you know, there was a gang rape of 8 women in that mine by Zamas into this, or are these like on these two sides of the same coin?
I think we have to...
Completely,
I was asking Mr. Lucipo, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, completely different. Let me first clarify. I hope Dr. Salme will agree with me. In South Africa, which is different in this case, in South Africa, when you make an application in terms of the MPRDA, part of the condition is that you must have what is called a rehabilitation fund. It's exactly what the Canadian model is. In fact, the South African model is borrowed from Canadian model since 2004. The problem, what makes this one different, is that the moment the court makes an order that the department has got no jurisdiction, it means the MPRDA therefore does not apply, because in this situation, for an example, the company would have done exactly what Dr. Salima says, would have said, we are setting aside this amount of money under a trust, or it is kept under a particular bank as surety, or it is put under the custodian of the department. so that in the event it fails to do what is called rehabilitation, the state will use that security to do rehabilitation. If it's open cast mining, it will then do concurrent rehabilitation. In this case, the moment the MPRDA is outside the ambit of this company, it actually meant the company could not put aside a rehabilitation fund so that in events of disasters like this one, you can then tap in from that. But also, it is possible, Doctor, let's agree, it is possible that the calculation may not be equal to the damage that can be caused. That is when then the state can ask for more, but there must be security, or what you call it, a rehabilitation fund that is set aside for incidences of rehabilitation. The moment the court made that ruling, it actually meant then that under the Department of Employment and Labor, such conditions do not apply. So every mining right goes with conditions of what has to be done since 2004. The difference again is that in the prior to 2004, the existence of the MPRDA, the derelict and ownerless mine had no liability of rehabilitation, which is why now the state is compelled to do rehabilitation on behalf of those mining companies. The third element that is a problem in mining with regards to rehabilitation is the fact that there is a conflict between two legislation in the bay, the Companies Act and the MPRDA. What you find in situations where companies are confronted by financial challenges, they opt for the Companies Act, which allows the use of business practitioners under the provision of insolvency, not the granting right, which is contained in the MPRDA. And that is what we have said, that you need a harmonization of the two legislations so that the principle of use it or lose it could then be effected with immediate effect. That is the difference that you find now with the Krugerstop situation, which is why we asked the department, if this company had applied, why did you keep the license for such a long time when the company was unable to be operational? So I'm saying those are two differences because the MPRDA does not apply in this situation as far as we understand in terms of the court order.
Well, hence I asked right at the beginning, if when the department saw that whether there's a conflict or the law is silent or you need harmonization, as you say, why didn't they do what needed to be done? Because they are the custodians. They are the ones who are constitutionally mandated to deal with these problems. And where there are loopholes, they're supposed to do everything in their power to close those loopholes, which, by the way, was the point we invited them this evening, and they were not so keen. And I guess the responsibility then falls on you.
The point is simple for the point is simple for you. One of my lecturers once told, don't question the law, you must ask the law. The point is that if the department says it received a legal opinion that says contrary to what we believe should have happened, that becomes difficult because we've got no legal basis. That is why we said, when we discovered this exercise, if you remember also my opening statement was that I assumed by virtue that there is a mining activity taking place, definitely it actually means it falls under the ambit of the department. Allow us therefore to engage the department to give us the reasons why they could not appeal that decision. But at the same time we say, with now this, let's say with hindsight, with this, doesn't it give you a strong case to argue when you apply to say, based on the recent incident that we have had, it gives a justification. Then let's deal with the lateness of the application. Again, it will also be subject to those who understand the legal framework. And we can then say, if they present to us a test case that based on these particular reasons, there was no basis for us to make an appeal, we'll then have to deal with the issue at that stage. Yes, I agree again, we have not been there. We're only going there on Friday. We're only going to get the actual facts behind, including whether it is true that the court order but that the authority, as far as inspections are concerned, could not take place. That's why I said I respect the views of the department, including the minister, that we shouldn't put the cart before the horse. But the truth of the matter is that what now is in the public domain. If it is true, we should not shy away to say then people must face the consequences of their actions.
Or non-actions. I mean, I trust Mr. Zulu-Zipho that, I mean, as the committee, you will indeed play your oversight role, and not only on this matter, but also perhaps get the department to be a lot more proactive on a whole range of other issues that this particular episode, including the Rustenburg one, throw up. Hopefully, I mean, you will really get them to do the right things. But it doesn't mean, though, I mean, we can't have a situation where the department decides to fold its arms and all they can do is point to the law. But a quick last word from you, Doc, on what people like Dr. Luzipho perhaps should be looking at going forward as well from, of course, the body.
Don't promote me for you. I'm not a doctor yet.
Oh, sorry, no. I didn't mean you. I didn't mean you. Obviously, point, Doc. If I mean to say, I mean, what do we look for? I mean, going forward, what are the sort of things that we need to be doing? And I'm assuming that the body of evidence that you've been able to churn out as Mistra and the publication that you are responsible for has actually, gotten some, information on this, which I think would be helpful to all of us.
We're all trying to give Mr. Lucipo a lot more authority than he wants. But I do encourage the parliamentary committee to look into the question of the more than 6,000 mines that need rehabilitation. They are claimed to be ownerless. How do we create legal frameworks to allow the state to look for these companies and to hold them accountable? In this case, there is the historical owner, which is De Beers. There is Johan Rupert's Rennet Investments, which sold it recently to Star Gems. We have the case of asbestos cleanup, which requires at least 30 billion rands. What we need is long-term funding to do this cleanup. And without it, we will continue to face such disasters and such human suffering. And we cannot measure it in relation to the money that is made from minerals. It's not an equation that we should be supporting if we really do want human-based development.
Do you disagree with that, Mr. Luzipo?
Look, I agree 100%. By the way, if you are busy, as this came in, we're in Limpopo, for the stair sport, as well as in the Capricorn.
Okay, we seem to be having problems with Mr. Luzipo's line. Well, that's where we are going to leave that
I'm
discussion.
saying we're dealing with the... But now this weekend we'll be in the Free State and Gauteng dealing with the same thing, looking at the magnitude. But the last thing I want to say, once I agree, I'm worried about one thing, and the state can't take liability for existing private companies that have been making money. Our people have been falling in the queue, waiting for houses. Our people have faced different disasters. Now, the state, if it's going to take responsibility to build houses on behalf of private companies that have accumulated profit, I think this is an issue that the country must take seriously. It is not that we don't sympathize with the disaster that happened at Jagersfontein. But you can't tell us that you are going to give people 20 million rands and we must be excited about that. There is too much damage has been caused. By the way, that 20 million rand is almost even less than a house that some of these companies, these directors of companies own. And I think for me, that's the issue that we must
Okay, no, there goes Mr. Luzipo's line again. Let's leave it there. Mr. Sahlulele Luzipo, who is the chairperson of the Parliament's Portfolio Committee on Minerals and Energy. Special thanks also to Dr. Salima Valiani, who is the editor of the publication, The Future of Mining in South Africa. Well, not too long ago, our crew that was on the ground in Jagersfontein came back to inform us of what the latest is from the people they met and people that they spoke to and how the situation is looking like. Here's what they have just filed.
The impact of the Jagersfontein diamond mine disaster is far from over. Environmental experts say the sludge may affect agricultural production. It's also likely to affect the ecosystem. The visible mudslides resulted from the mine dam burst.
The long-term impact is likely to be on the ecosystem rather than on human health. So assuming that the people that live close by survived the initial catastrophic failure. So the assumption is that if they were not injured or harmed during the actual event itself, then the chance of injury or harm long-term after the event is relatively small.
Government says an investigation should be conducted on the safety measures at the troubled mine. It says lessons should have been learned from a similar mine disaster which happened almost 3 decades ago in Virginia. In February 1994, a mine dam also failed and flooded the suburb of Maritzburg in the Free State.
Both the Department of Minerals, Resources and Energy, as well as water, put in more stringent guidelines to ensure that the repeat of Maritzburg does not happen. And unfortunately, 20 years later, here we are. So we need also to understand whether there was complacency and people did not do what they needed to do in order to avoid this situation.
The Minerals Council of South Africa says it will continue to encourage its members to review their tailings management operational standards. President Cyril Ramaphosa said the Minerals Council will analyze the state of mine dams in the country. The Minerals Council says the Jagersfontein assets are not owned by any of their members and that it has no information about the management of the dams in the Jagersfontein. The South African Human Rights Commission is conducting a parallel investigation.
We are also looking into possibilities of us as Human Rights Commission taking up this matter with responsible parties, the mining company that manages that area and government. We are always concerned and have always been concerned about the mining dams that are not being, managed properly.
Authorities say it's been a struggle to restore the water supply in Jagersfontein. The water infrastructure was completely submerged in the sludge.
With the help of the mine, we managed to get back the plant being operational at around about 3 o'clock in the afternoon yesterday. And so the situation now is that the whole area of Jagersfontein is receiving water. However, we still have one tank of bloom water just to make sure that in terms of contingency, we can cover some areas like Charlesville that could not get water.
Jagersfontein Development says it will conduct its investigation. It insists that numerous inspections were done on the site and it was declared safe. Aphumelele Mdlalane, SABC News, Jagersfontein.
Aphumelele there with the situation on the ground. We're going to move to this now. After the break, we look at the country's tuberculosis crisis. Welcome back. According to the World Health Organization, South Africa is among 30 or so worst affected countries that account for about 86% of the world's infections, deaths and suffering. TB, according to the World Body, is now the second leading infectious killer disease after COVID-19. Now, experts from around the world have descended on Durban to discuss this issue. Among them is the head of South Africa's TB program, Professor Norbert Njeka, who joins us on the line from Durban. Good evening, Prof. Thanks very much for your time.
Good evening, Will, and good evening to the viewers. Thank you.
A very unflattering picture of the TB situation in South Africa.
Yes, we do have a challenge at hand. We still see a lot of people die from tuberculosis, which is unacceptable. This is a curable disease. It is preventable. We can do better.
How did we get here?
You say the TB is not forgiving. When you don't take it serious, it will hit you back somewhere in the future. So it's really additions of a few things, small things that we did not do well in the past, which are haunting us now. Now, the theme of this conference is working together to get TB back on track. We're trying to recover from losses made during COVID. But to be honest, we were not doing extremely well before COVID. So it's really COVID, but with other challenges that we, came across before, prior to COVID.
What are these things? What are these things that are coming back to haunt us? What did we not do?
So the role of TB program is to find people with TB and link them to care and make sure they stay in care. But also prevention is critical, although we know that to treat is to prevent, but primary prevention is much better. So over the years, prevention has been really limited. We've not had, we've not put a lot of effort on primary prevention, just educating people. For example, we've been wanting to have people wear masks at our TB clinics, for example, or maybe just outpatient department, because your biggest areas of transmission are those places where unsuspected and diagnosed people with TB live. And in TB hospitals, they have TB, you take precautions, but when they sit at the general outpatient at Bara, you don't know. But also, we've not been linking all patients to care. All the people, we don't even find all people with TB. For example, in the year 2020, we were supposed to find 328,000 people with TB. We found just around 200,000. So those are the people who then form a reservoir that continue to infect other people. So linkage to care is a problem, but retention to care, we still have up to 10, 12% of our people with TB not finishing treatment. They will just abscond, they will leave treatment. We call them lost to follow-up. So these are the things that are really creating major challenges for us now.
Let's go through a few of them, Prof, if we may. Why are we finding it difficult to get people who are infected to do the right things when, for example, they are visiting clinics and hospital? What is making it difficult to get those people to do what needs to be done to prevent the spread? So
the first point of discussion really here, or the challenge we have, is that traditionally you want to screen people to test them. So you'll ask, are you coughing? Are you sweating at night? Are you losing weight? If one of those is a yes, then you test. But the TB prevalence survey, the first one that we did recently, showed that there are a lot of people who don't have symptoms, yet they have TB. So those people are transmitting, but we didn't know. And really the level of knowledge was that you need symptoms to have TB. Now we know you could have TB without symptoms. Now, people whom we find don't get to start treatment, a lot of factors. Many of them come very late for treatment. Some will even die before they get results. And so sometimes the clinic, they prefer to go far, the stigma associated and all that. But then the education needs to be improved, because why should patients leave treatment? It means that we need to improve TB patient education so that they could stay in care and finish their treatment.
Is stigma the only reason for people, absconding or not receiving or going back to receive their treatment or visiting clinics and hospitals?
I think that is multifactorial. Stigma is one of them, but sometimes just transport to travel. Although with our TB, we have clinics, all our clinics treat TB. MDR TB or multi-drug resistant tuberculosis is different. You have to travel to a place sometimes far from your area. So cost is also a issue. Late seeking care, people seek care quite late, and then to an extent that maybe they don't have, they feel even more sick to come back for treatment. So it's really multifactorial. So one of the things that we're trying to do to deal with that is to send a SMS to everybody who get TB in the country. So our National Health Laboratory Service has started this, and we're hoping that we'll see some benefit in the months to come, because if people get information, traditionally they will have to come back to the hospital or the clinic to get results. So these are some of the things, interventions we're doing to keep people or to get them for treatment.
And one would imagine, the increase in drug-resistant TB is another big contributing factor, and so would be HIV.
Yes, 60% of our MDR TB patients, for example, are people living with HIV. So that is a challenge. Drug-resistant tuberculosis is also another challenge. Although we have 58% of people with drug-resistant tuberculosis or multi-drug-resistant tuberculosis in the country who never had any form of tuberculosis before. So it shows that transmission is quite high, and we need to improve prevention.
Are there, outside of like HIV prevalence and of course the other factors you mentioned, are there communities or places that are particularly who have a particular vulnerability towards tuberculosis, where perhaps with certain interventions you could do a lot more than is probably the case at the moment?
So in terms of numbers, we have KwaZulu-Natal province and Gauteng and Eastern Cape and Western Cape. Those four provinces have 70% of TB in the country, 60 to 70%, sometimes even more, some of our cohorts. So it's really interesting. We see less TB in Limpopo. We used to think that they don't have a lot of laboratories, but there have been a lot of laboratories in Limpopo and other provinces. We see less people. But I think these provinces have a lot of TB because the big cities, you find congregate settings where there are a lot of people in, for example, city of eThekwini, or city of Johannesburg, city of Tshwane, city of Cape Town, and those are the places where many people that get TB in terms of where they live, but also the mode of transportation to work, to school, things like those. Yeah.
Of course, I mean, acknowledging the problem is only one part. It doesn't necessarily take you to solutions or to dealing with the problem. It's probably only the first step. So what is being done?
So what we're doing is we've we compiled our TB recovery plan to improve, number one, the way in which we do to find people with TB. And there are new things. For example, we're saying that instead of waiting for people to have symptoms, then test, we're saying high-risk groups, people living with HIV, people who are living with those who have been told that they have TB through laboratory means, and people who've had TB in the past. Those categories, you don't need symptoms to test. You can test with laboratory, but we're also increasing the number of digital chest X-rays, because you realize that in those people who don't have symptoms, sometimes the lungs will show that there could be tuberculosis. So we've increased this. We do urine dam among people living with HIV to enhance the chance of finding tuberculosis. So those are some of the new interventions that we're doing. We're planning to shorten treatment regimens. For example, for MDR TB, we have two groups. Some get 9 months treatment, others get 18 months. From next year, we're making plans to start everybody on 6 months treatment regimens. And the pill burden makes a difference. Right now, they get 23 pills a day. And with the new 6 month regimen we're going to start next year, we're going to have 23 tablets a week and 3 drugs or 4. Right now, 7 drugs, 23 pills a day. So those are some of the things that we're bringing in. We're going to shorten treatment for children to 4 months with TB. So there's a lot that we are really doing. But also strengthen advocacy, communication. Our people need to know exactly what's happening so that they could also do the right thing.
But do we know, I mean, if people actually know the basics of, like, what to look for, so that they can seek help, or much earlier than later. Do we know if everyone knows what they should be looking out for, what the symptoms are, and what to do when they suspect that they may have TB?
Yes, we educating people around that, but also we put a TB check app, which really helps people to do screening for TB, and then so they will respond to a questionnaire, and the app will then suggest whether they should be tested, what the issue, should they go to the clinic, and all this. It's something that we've just started. It's still work in progress. Most people are not yet aware of this, but also our clinics provide education. Our partners, various NGOs are doing this, but I agree with you. It's something that we really need to partner with the media and everyone to educate. We have a World TB Day once a year on the 24th March, but I think we should have a World TB Day every 3 months where the media talks about tuberculosis, and not just wait for the World TB Day or the TB conference, which comes like every 2 years, like the conference we have now. We need to improve advocacy, communication, and social mobilization around that. But also from National TB Program, we have a unit that is planning engagement with traditional leaders and traditional healers and all stakeholders out there. We're working with civil society as well. We're hoping that there will be improvement around this topic.
And we depend on you to lead us in that mission, Prof. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
For now, we'll leave it there. He is, of course, the head of the country's tuberculosis program, on the back of the news that, we are number 8. We are in the top 8 countries that account for 2/3 of the total TB burden worldwide. Behind India, China, Indonesia, the Philippines, Pakistan, Nigeria, Bangladesh, we are number 8. Not a flattering picture and not a good account of ourselves, given the resources at our disposal, but also the profile of our country. But we're going to leave it there for now. And of course, there is that a conference going on in Durban, looking at this issue worldwide. Experts from around the world are congregating in Durban, discussing this very same issue. That's our show for tonight. Do join us again tomorrow evening, same time. Have a good night.